welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Indicio's CTO, Ken Ebert, and our VP of Communications and Governance, Trevor Butterworth. And they're here to discuss the progress in creating an EU digital identity ecosystem with the Digital Identity EUDI wallet and eIDAS 2.0. Thanks you both for taking the time to speak to me today. For those unfamiliar, and just kind of set the stage for what we'll be talking about. Could you please give us a brief overview of what exactly Europe is trying to create here?
So, first, let's start with the concept of Europe. It's 27 countries, freedom of movement. A couple of decades ago, they decided on a single European currency, which, coupled with freedom of movement, made things incredibly easy for tourists and travelers. You can just simply pay with in euro wherever you go. Now, scroll forward, and we have Europe has a decade of sort of digital, what do they call it? A digital decade program. So by 2030, they want to provide a sort of secure, privacy-preserving, non-trackable digital services for every aspect of a European citizen's life. So from, sort of verified records, driver's licenses, payments, access to government services, all of this will be, you'll be able to manage seamlessly and effectively through your mobile device. And to do that, of course, across a continent of 27 different countries, you need some kinds of standardization. So, for instance, right now with payments, everybody has a different, so there's multiple different banks and mobile apps, and there's no real interoperability. So the idea is let's create a series of standards, open source, so that there's a level playing field, and as long as you meet these standards, you can go and create your apps, and people will be able to use them, and there'll be this interoperability. So when not just you don't have to, you've got the same principle of being able to cross borders, access services, pay for things, and all through the magic of the EUDI digital wallet.
It's a grand vision, but I'd like to point out some of the things that it's not. So it doesn't take into consideration how people outside of the EU could participate when they visit the EU, nor does it take into account how people from the EU might take their credentials and their data outside of the EU when they go traveling somewhere else. Within the borders of the EU, I think that they're trying to set this up so that identities can cross borders more readily, and I think that they can potentially achieve that goal. And I think that would be an enormous step forward. I think followed by some revisions to both the laws that are in eIDAS and some of the implementation in EUDI that could now then expand the use cases to be more inclusive of the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, I think it's a grand vision, but making a grand vision work across so many different constituencies inevitably hits the problems of achieving consensus, especially around which technical standards and if you have to get sign off from governments on all of these, it can be a slow process. So I think the bottom line is that we are seeing one of the major sort of trading blocks, one of the major sort of business units of the global, sort of globalized world, adopt decentralized identity and adopt verifiable credentials. And inevitably, this is fantastic. It's a great vision. But it will inevitably, it won't perhaps move as quickly as those of us who are in a more sort of business forward, let's build things that work really quickly and get them out there environment. So I think there will be a gap between what's achievable, what companies and enterprises are going to build with through verifiable credentials and verifiable data, and the slow moving juggernaut of the EU bureaucracy, which will perhaps take a little bit of time to catch up with that. But the signal is that, hey, verifiable identities, decentralized identity, this is the future is coming at us fast and slow at the same time.
Exactly. So we covered a lot of information there. If I could summarize really quickly, because a lot of the headlines can be a little bit misleading, I feel like, particularly when it comes to EUDI wallets, right? So this is not a new, while it is pertaining to new technology, this is all just essentially standards and guidelines for how to build your own wallet, how to implement it into your own application. Is that correct?
There is some aspect of certification of both wallets and issuers and verifiers in the EU um, eIDAS system. And so it's more than just a technology stack. The roots of trust are government grounded or rooted. And so there's an aspect of that. So even if I write my own wallet, if it's not, it has to follow the standards and it has to use the mechanisms of trust establishment that are contained in the eIDAS legislation. And so you can't just, it's not completely decentralized identity. It's semi-decentralized identity because there's some aspect of the government's wanting to provide assurance that the participants are trustworthy and will play by the rules of the game. And those two are in tension to have both the realization of the fully decentralized system balanced with the European concern for making sure that participants are vetted in some way and before they can participate.
All right. So obviously, Trevor, just like you mentioned, 27 countries, big continent, a lot going on and a lot happening. How can companies be ready to, kind of capitalize and be compliant with all these new standards and regulations that are happening?
Well, they can start by using Indicio Proven. We have incorporated the eIDAS standards. We now offer a EUDI compatible wallet. And I think Ken is probably better equipped to talk about the nature of that. But the headline is that, we don't just give you Europe, we enable Europe to connect to the world and the world to connect to Europe because we offer such a wide variety of different credentials, standards, and formats and protocols. And we also are able to make them all work together. So, we obviously are very, fully decentralized. We offer fully decentralized options, but we enable you to have a kind of universal system to build solutions that work with the new European standards, but also allow you to work with standards that other countries and areas are adopting. So it's the best of both worlds, really. But I think Ken is better placed to explain what the European technology and how we achieve this sort of omnibus solution.
So the proven architecture is pluggable. That's because we believe that there will not be one ring to rule them all or one standard that is going to completely dominate the world. There are different use cases, and some of them require higher levels of privacy and security, and others can be at a lower standard. For a passport, you want something really strong. For something like a coupon or something like that, you don't need something of that strength. So we've taken the option of offering multiple standards for both credential representation and protocols to exchange those. Examples of standards with high assurance would be non-creds or SD-JOTs. Examples of protocols would be DIDCOM, which is a very extensible and universal protocol, and OID for VC, which is a little bit more simple, but is a little simpler to implement. And so you have various representations of credentials, various signature styles of cryptography suites, various protocols. All of those things need to be flexible because as the technology evolves, new ones will come along and need to be plugged into the suite of things. so that you can support the EU and their initiatives, which are focused more on the SD-CHOT or OID for VC mechanisms. Or if you want to support India, they've kind of gone with the non-cred and DIDCOM method, or Canada. And so there's different parts of the world who have picked different standards, and some of them will support more than one. And being interoperable and being able to support multiple gives you kind of a worldwide coverage in the technology set of protocol standards, representations, and all that. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility to be able to handle both. So if you have a country that needs to admit tourists from the EU, you can do that. If you have also have tourists coming from India, then you can do that too. So you have the ability to cover the populations of the world, whether they're in the EU or elsewhere. And I think that's an important consideration.
The yeah, I think the key sort of the key takeaway, I think, if you're a business, is that you're seeing a market of what, 450 million people move towards semi-decentralized digital identities. How are you going to interact with that market? Both if you're inside the EU and if you're outside the EU. And how do you do so in a way that gives you maximum flexibility to cross business borders? So I think that's where the strength of our solution comes into play, is that it allows you to do both. It allows you to combine both. But the higher level message is really that there is this technological evolution means that we are moving to a more streamlined architecture for digital interaction. It simplifies the business of life and business life. It reduces paperwork. It removes, sort of manual data entry error. It allows for rationalizing information in a way that creates efficiency. Because every entity can be identified authoritatively and can interact with each other, and that is a sort of a massive change in sort of the self-organization of business and society, right? It represents this greater efficiency in interaction, because we can trust information and digital information in a much more robust way, and in ways that preserve privacy, so gets us through all the data privacy compliance without issues. And that represents huge business opportunity. So I think the key is to be ready to enter that market, to be ready to explore, to be ready to see how you can, in business, make money and save money and mitigate risk. I mean, the three cardinal goals, or the three goals of business. So that's this is the direction that we're going in, and we're giving you the tools to get there in the fastest, most efficient way possible.
So Trevor, you've mentioned the idea of streamlining the interactions, getting rid of the paper and so forth. That's, I think, a really good first step, and that can happen with most verifiable credential systems, including Proven. One of the things I think that Proven allows is the bring your own biometrics. As biometrics regulations around the world tighten up, and prohibitions against companies keeping their own database of biometric data, bring your own biometrics, where the biometrics are stored in a verifiable credential and could be presented by the traveler or the customer when and where they need them. That allows for participation for those who choose to allow their biometrics to be used to identify them at a cash register or crossing a border or wherever they want to do that sort of thing. And that eases both compliance with regulations on how biometric data is stored and used, but it also meets the requirement of the privacy and consent of the person participating, whether they choose a biometrics experience or choose to not. participate in that level. But they still all can participate in the level of the digitization of the documents that might need to be shared, bank account information, a passport, a visa, a certification using open badges. All of those are a huge leap forward in both the quality of the data and the trust in the data because it comes from a trustworthy source.
I want to underscore what Ken has just said around biometrics. I mean, the EU is often criticized for being, sort of overly focused on regulation. And indeed, just today, the Polish premier was critical of that impulse. But I think when it comes to biometric security, that caution is justified. I mean, we talk about biometric security and privacy with the simple phrases that you can't reset your face if somebody steals your biometrics. It's a much greater existential risk, and which is why the European Union is incredibly stringent about sort of biometric security and privacy. And I think that's where, and at the same time, that sort of the authoritativeness that can come with biometric authentication is going to be indispensable for financial transactions and payments within a digital wallet environment. So being able to, simultaneously present to a liveness check and present an authenticated biometric, say that's one that's been verified from your passport, and being able to automatically compare those at the same time is going to be, I think, critical for getting payments off the ground, which is one of the sort of the big goals of the European digital wallet. And I think that's where Indicio's track record in digital travel and in working with digital travel credentials and digital passports has real value.
All right. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper if we could, right? Because obviously you've mentioned it streamlines business and it will help across, all these different countries and all these different banking solutions. If we could dig a little deeper, how exactly does the new digital wallet simplify payments, from a business or an individual perspective?
So when you combine an identity type credential along with your payment mechanism, you have a higher level of trust that it's not somebody using my credit card to make a payment without it being me. So there's some levels of assurance that can be added to the equation to increase or decrease fraud and reduce risk for the merchants accepting the payment mechanisms, and for the person making the payment to know that they're talking to a legitimate retailer instead of a fraud site or something like that. So that there's I think fraud reduction and assurance that the payments are going to the right parties is probably the first step in the payments mechanisms that can be enabled by this new trend towards the digital wallets.
And I also think that consumers are looking for all this to happen in real time, right? So you have a generation, those sort of under 40 expect seamless experiences, so the ability to do that kind of authoritative verification instantly and then send money instantly, person to person, person to merchant, is and make that work seamlessly and beautifully with an almost the negligible experience of actually having to negotiate an app is what's going to make this technology really powerful.
Sounds good. So it looks like we are coming to the end of our time here. Would either of you have any parting thoughts that you really want to make sure that people know about EUDI or eIDAS or, business with Europe moving forward with these new decentralized digital identities?
I would advise people to start early and get working on compatibility with at least the representations and protocols, working on a wallet, may be in their future, but I think focusing on the verifiers and the issuers as well to say, where is the value derived for my business? Where is the value derived for my end customer in the process, and focusing on the parts that are going to bring the greatest amount of value. There will be change in the eIDAS and the EUDI as it rolls forward to roll out. There will be a version 2. I can almost guarantee it. And so being flexible in what you're doing, and taking an approach that allows for that growth to happen and not feeling like it's cast in concrete.
With emerging technology, things seem to move slowly, 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 but then there's going to be a cascade. And you don't want, the people that are prepared for that moment when suddenly this is the new reality are going to profit from it. So this is your moment not to miss out.
Sounds good. Well, it looks like that is about our time for today. I really appreciate both of you joining us, Ken and Trevor. If you at home are interested in learning a bit more about decentralized identity and verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue to bring you some more educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics that you'd like for us to cover or dive a little bit deeper into, please go ahead and leave a comment below, and we'll be sure to read and address them. Thank you all for watching.